I think I can state with confidence humans are innately inquisitive creatures. Evolutionarily, we have the intrinsic need for exploration, or that is to say, the dangerous whisper of curiosity. Curiosity killed the cat. This idiom spoken by the mouth of playwright Ben Jonson is likely a quote you've heard many a time, likely to an irritating degree due to its common misuse by many. While the quote may be a cautionary tale to ward off those of the danger of the unknown, as time went by, the true meaning of the idiom has been lost. Curiosity killed the cat, but satisfaction brought it back. While it is beneficiary to be wary of what you do not know, curiosity should never be deterred from the soul. Curiosity, this unmistakably essential part of our lives, came about during the dawn of man and our need to survive, like many other emotions and reflexes we are left with. It helped us explore, recon our world, understand what we can and cannot tamper with, to let us survive and avoid our deaths. But sitting here in our urban biomes and comfortable domiciles, we are left with no more need for survival. Our instincts haunt us from the days we struggled from the clutch of nature. And so this curiosity, when put outside the intended use of survival, we begin to approach things as little gods and try to understand them, methodically tearing them apart bit by bit with our brutish hands, away from the blaze of danger. Our curiosity to live can sometimes morph into a perverted need to understand everything, to an almost insatiable degree. But how does this curiosity affect the way we see our digital worlds, our video games? Well, let's talk about that. Video games, to say the least, has comfortably introduced itself as a pillar in many people's lives, either growing up or as drifting adults. While some may state that video games are too unsophisticated or just plain not good enough to be an art form, like many, I disagree. It's been said 1,000 times over, video games offer near infinite interactive experiences that some mediums just simply cannot offer. Fantastical adventures, terrifying worlds, empty worlds, dreamlike experiences, explorations of the unknown, the slaying of 1,000-year-old beasts, Dark Souls, horror games, point and clicks. Pretty much everything possible within the bounds that code can offer. We create worlds to enjoy, much like the creative forces that created our very existence. And with these memories, video games bring us comfort. They have brought anger and sadness, but the feelings and memories you've made with these games are an essential ingredient to have a satisfying, memorable experience. And as we hold games to such a high status, it becomes increasingly blurrier to realize that these worlds are strung together with the very human hands of people. That these worlds, after all, remain fabrications bound by the silk of a CPU's electric firings. Indie games, or independent games in a strange way, are much more human than AAA games by monolithic companies. It comes across as no surprise that games by small teams of people with full creative freedom generally tend to feel much more homemade than games that were created by teams of people who simply act as cogs in a larger pool of workers, being fed the fetish of money as their reward. Bugs, glitches, and video game glue are what humanize these games by small teams. They are reminders of what holds the games together, that these experiences remain crafted lights on your monitor. So when you see a glitch in a AAA game, it becomes a strikingly sobering reminder that you had tucked away when immersed in the given world. The difference of seeing a glitch in a AAA game is that it may come off as amateurish work, a lack of effort, or even to some, unplayable. These traces of humanity are criticized as they bastardize the reputation of the companies that make these games, often fixed responsively, unlike indie games made by people who wish to share a creative vision. It's almost cruel how harsh some people are to developers. That's why nicer communities may even have ladybugs, a communally agreed term for glitches that are amusing or useful, therefore left intentionally in the games by the developers, almost sympathizing the bugs to a degree. Now, picture this. It's 2004, Christmas time. You finally come downstairs and open your presents. You finally get to a rectangular-shaped gift. It's Half-Life 2. You're absolutely overjoyed and a smile hits your face. As time passes, you sit on your parents' office chair, playing on the family computer. It's a snowy evening and you are playing your fresh new copy of Half-Life 2. The visual direction looks much more gritty than the first game, which you, as an adolescent from the 2000s, greatly enjoy. The game is an absolute blast. You are on the Ravenholm section, afraid of what lurks in the darkness. Shooting the enemies relentlessly attacking you, you miss your shot and accidentally hit the trees off in the back. However, you notice something peculiar. For some strange reason, the dark shadows of the trees towering before you have bullet holes from the previous shot sprayed across, even on the air between the trees. Almost as if the trees were just an image. But that doesn't compute for you. You who does not know how games work. But as you keep playing the game, you ponder on it. On why the trees were just an image instead of actual trees. Eventually, time passes and you start playing early Gmod. The game is a neat sandbox, but there's not much to do. One of your friends told you that there's a secret way to fly, as you acknowledge suspiciously. You press the alien tilde key on your keyboard as your friends rumored, and a strange console opens. An unfamiliar screen full of lots of colored and strange words. You type bind v no clip, whatever that may mean or signify, and type enter. Exiting the console, the world remains unchanged, unmoving, with the eerie stillness that still haunts Gmod to this day. Pressing V on your keyboard, well, nothing happens. You keep pressing V, trying to walk forward, and suddenly jerk forwards. You can fly, and it controls a bit strangely. With your newfound superpowers, you take a joyride soaring through the map. But flying too high, looking down, you're struck by a digital vertigo from how far from the ground you find yourself. But even more strangely, you see the entirety of the map. And it's not quite what you thought. Lots of the ground outside of the play area is missing, and the buildings float above the sky, which said sky is under the larger void that these objects and buildings dangle over, like a big dome. Some architecture and objects are just flat images, just like the trees back in Ravenholm, and some of the buildings are even missing their tops and backs. Just what is going on here? You were clearly never meant to see this. You know what I'm getting to. The floating buildings, missing faces on objects, flat textures disguised as fully 3D objects. These are all just the tricks developers pull on you to convince that you are in a world. By all means, you are in a world, but when you educate yourself over time on how games truly work, you are almost granted this forbidden knowledge that the worlds you've tread is all merely just smoking mirrors. Each area you enter in games need to get rid of or unload the last area you were in and prepare the next one you're about to enter. And each area can only contain so many objects and polygons. So the developers have to get around these problems by trying to optimize the games as much as possible so the game doesn't start to lag, which would completely ruin the player's immersion. Let me say that again. The player's immersion. The worlds, the sound effects, soundscapes, the developers do it all for one thing and one thing only. And that is the player's immersion. The world must be credible, convincing, else the player is brought to a state of sobriety and disconnected from the world they were meant to enjoy. For some, this is bad for the game's overall image. For others, this will mean less or no salary for their failed work. So these godly developers, they put up invisible walls, textures with maps that make them look 3D, make some walls unscalable, make farther objects flat images, call out polygons from objects that always face the player, unload the world behind the player, everything. And chances are, you already know that the games you play are mere fabrications, yet you play them anyway. Many people are already aware of this, and yet Most developers strive to work against this reminder that haunts their work, and understandably, for noble reason. Now, the small group of you may not know what an out of bounds is, which is completely understandable. Not everyone dissects everything they consume. To simply put it, an out of bounds is the world outside of the region intended for gameplay to transpire in video games. The player is not meant to see or go outside of the game's bounds, thus making it an out of bounds. Though there is a strange symbolism to the true world that exists outside of all bounds in video games. We, as a jumble of scripts and actions like the rest of all other entities in our games, have the power to peer into the machinations of our surroundings, peeking behind the curtains that the creators forbid you unveil. There is a sort of stillness, knowing that this emptiness surrounds you at all times, that objects you cannot see are taken away from the world just as they are summoned back. While the player should not feel like they're at the center of the world, they, ironically, are not the world themselves and hopelessly are. There's a strange, almost godlike feeling into being able to see what was never intended to ever be seen. Like an ever-present audience that were missing their faces. A week ago, I had made a survey with a couple questions regarding people's feelings towards their experiences accidentally running into an out-of-bounds area. To say the least, I was rather surprised by the many replies I got. In terms of the poll themselves, well... According to the survey, most people discovered their very first out of bounds by clipping out of the world, which is the most common way to exit the world's boundaries through accidental means, with peering through an angle as the second most popular accident, and console commands as the last. Clipping, in video games, is the phenomenon at which an entity or object's hitbox may collide or exist within another, which causes difficulties for the physics engine to process how to stop those objects from existing within one another. This is characterized by a violent, unnatural jerking as those objects get stuck together and try to escape one another, with the collisions chained into each other and sometimes letting out large bursts of kinetic movement as the physics engine thinks the hard bumping collisions are creating speed. So with most video game maps being so expansive nowadays, there is absolutely a small piece of geometry that does not accommodate to the player's form, therefore allowing for exploitation to leave out of bounds, or exiting by complete accident even. When staring outside of the bounds, most people expressed fascination, feeding into the idea that our curiosity is the culprit for this unknowing hunger to understand our surroundings. The second most picked answer was confusion, understandably since most people who peered into the void for the first time would have been perplexed at an unlikely sight, a view that showed an unexpected truth. The third most picked answer was an apathetic awe, and the last a fear for this void. This is what is most interesting to me. 75% of all people, when discovering the out-of-bounds for the first time, had their views on video games permanently changed. It comes to no surprise that people's views on video games were permanently changed after learning the way the worlds were constructed, specifically to harbor immersion. There is something fascinating knowing that somebody could play video games for years and never know what lies beyond the veil of polygons and particles. There is the arbitrary choice to explore further and find out the true nature of the video game's world, the map, the very essence of all video games. And this discovery is what I think becomes a crucial awakening in the active dissection of video games, which next comes the interest for game design, the brush that gave reason to anything in video games. On a side note, I had asked if people were afraid of skyboxes. 2/3 said no, 1/3 said yes. Something interesting brews to me about this. This survey was very useful in understanding people's collective feelings towards video games and its organs, giving numerical statistics to point to a vaguely ultimate answer to these, tragically unasked questions. But the true proverbial cherry on top of all of this was the replies I had gotten, giving me insightful stories on people's experiences. Here are a few noteworthy ones.
This may not be directly correlated, but I think I actually managed to die in Minecraft Creative Pocket Edition. I either fell out of the map or drowned. I was terrified and cried for like 2 hours, and then that was amplified when I think I first played Minecraft on a console. I tried to go to the void or break bedrock, and I watched a video on how to do it. I fell in and I got shocked when I died. I called for my sister and she was just as shocked as I was. This was like 2014, 2015, about a year after I started playing Minecraft. Terrifying stuff for my tiny prepubescent child brain though, sort of like an enlightening experience for how terrifying simple things can be.
I can't remember my very first time doing this, but I've got memories of doing this with an action replay cartridge and my copy of Mario 64 DS. The more I used it, the more buggy my cartridge became. My copy was also pre-owned and already complete, so I didn't discover everything myself, so I was always Waluigi hunting. I think the thing that gets to me the most is that Big Boo's Haunt was always the buggiest level for some reason, despite being my favourite. Retroactively, I think it was my favourite because of my fear of going there. Normally it would just be a goofy ghost level in a Mario game, but to me, I was constantly afraid of something being there. I would moon jump and no clip out of the bounds all the time, and I remember going out of the cage around the level and I was making my way into the purple skybox of that forest in the background. I began getting really paranoid that something was out there. In general, the music in the level really began to get to me. Eventually my game crashed, and the music was frozen in place, holding down one of the chords, and eventually a loud buzzing happened as my screen freaked out and became a jumbled mess of numbers and artifacting. Nothing more happened besides the game crashing, and it crashed a lot, but that time always stuck with me because I panic switched off the DS thinking that some horrid thing in the woods was coming. Childhood imagination really fucks with you. Nowadays I just find it interesting.
I have one. When I fell out of the bounds in Minecraft for the first time, or really just flew under in creative, it felt as if I was about to be pulled under by some monster. I didn't even like to look at it because of whatever might be in there and the eternal abyss that it was. I forgot to mention I was a bit afraid and slightly curious at the same time. Not enough tweet space.
And finally,
I would say my first experience with bugs in video games was when I was playing Assassin's Creed 2. As you might know, Ubisoft game, thus notoriously buggy. I was riding a horse through some fields in which there really isn't anything, and we're mostly there for scenery. While galloping, I randomly got eaten by the ground and clipped out of the floor, then began falling down with horse and all. And, oddly enough, I thought it was a feature. Assassin's Creed is known for its desynchronizations in which your character dies or something happens causing you to restart because you weren't supposed to go there or do that. Ergo, I assumed that was the case and just waited for the game to reload my last checkpoint. Alas, that did not happen, and I just kept falling until I decided to get off the horse, which somehow caused me to stop in my tracks, but the horse still plummeted into the grey void. I looked up only to see the entire city and all the NPCs from below. All the models that I wasn't supposed to see. All the clipping and rough textures hidden off camera. I obviously had no idea what was happening. And I wouldn't even think about that because at the moment my only idea was, how do I take advantage of this? In Assassin's Creed 2 there are these chest rooms scattered across the maps with goodies in them, but they had strong enemies guarding them. Naturally I thought maybe I could get there from the inside. I began walking towards the closest one while looking up. To my surprise I was actually going up, slowly. I presume this part of the map was lower in the skybox and gave that impression. I could reach the chest room because I popped up in a nearby street when I got too close. And this was the most surreal part for me because the game just went on. There was absolutely nothing different. I had changed nothing. There were no errors, no glitches. I just kept playing. And the experience made me realize a couple things about how games work, such as the fact that programmers don't code room by room and that's it, but rather there's an entire world or box out there packed with the entire game. They're not connected to each other in a way one would expect. Sometimes they don't even exist until you reach them. This definitely changed how I played some games too, as I began relentlessly searching for spots you could get off the map in, say, Destiny 1. So many spots to do that in that game, it almost felt intentional. Watching tutorials on how to get to them and even the benefits some will have, mostly skipping certain sections of a map. Thanks, horse.
a lot of these have a few reoccurring statements, like their perception of video games being permanently altered, becoming more fascinated by the void outside of the maps rather than being afraid of them as time went on, their first experiences putting them in awe. All points I had repeated several times by now. But a strangely reoccurring thing I myself wasn't expecting was a large mention of Minecraft's void under the world. Minecraft, to me, holds an extremely special place in my heart. Like many other people growing up in the 2000s, it brings a profound sense of nostalgia that many people share, which usually nostalgia is something many people can't share since they usually come from personal experience.
Hello once again,
Stress.
Server virtual.
Okay, let's use it.
I think the emotional connection everyone has of Minecraft is an undiscussed psychological phenomenon, with the game being released at a very specific time for people to start growing up with it. Minecraft will forever and ever be a comforting figure to me, with the endless nostalgic content that used to come about back in the day. Simpler times, others would call it. I think that, unlike other games, Minecraft's sandbox nature immortalizes its presence in gaming, as it still remains a highly relevant game to this day, and in a few years, I might even still be nostalgic for the days I speak in right now. Now, funnily enough, I had actually made a tweet before expressing how eerie Minecraft's void is and how no one seems to acknowledge so. While Minecraft's world is peaceful with its simplicity, we forget the world tricks us into building our oaken homes and little farms, unaware that we stand over the gaping maw of nothingness. Many people have their own theories over what Minecraft's void is. Some believe it to be an endless darkness with something sinister underneath. Others believe it to be the spaces that separate the overworld and its other dimensions, like the Nether and the End. And others believe it to be an endless void. That is the most terrifying thought. That there is nothing underneath. A darkness that exists under the thin layer of grass. On a cosmic scale, we are near nothing, if there truly is nothing under and over us. Just a sheet of grass and minerals that expand infinitely. But, curiously, this void does not count as an out of bounds. Sure, it's technically impossible to reach by the game's conventions, but it's not a true out of bounds. Minecraft's out of bounds is likely the least known out there. If you enter spectator mode and glide through the ground, everything will look as you expect it. You can see through the walls and into the rooms and see the pockets of lava and caves sprinkled about the underground. But most people don't know that when digging and breaking blocks, the player is not chipping away at the world, but rather creating it. When breaking blocks, the player is not uncovering the blocks behind the one they just broke. The world generates more blocks around, as having a world of just millions of blocks just existing away from the player's vision would be inefficient. So the world technically exists at the pickaxe's hands. But enough talk about the void in Minecraft's out of bounds. There's something that remains even more unnoticed than both of these things combined deep within the game. Can you guess it? I'd like to do a little game with you. It's very simple. I just want you to try and understand what these paintings depict. Now, many of you may actually already know the artist behind many of the paintings, or what some of these paintings already depict. For those who do not, let me educate you. If you know anything about Minecraft at all, you may have noticed I had only shown you the one-by-one paintings. All Minecraft paintings that are basically undiscernible. A lot of people say it's pictures of food, or scenery, or just plain abstract. Since a lot of other paintings are at least just a little bigger, it's kind of easier to understand. But this? What is this? Well, it's the work of Kristopher Zetterstrand. Kristopher Zetterstrand, born in Stockholm, Sweden, is a Swedish surreal artist. Zetterstrand studied at the Royal University College of Fine Arts in Stockholm and Facultad de Bellas Artes in Madrid. Zetterstrand's works are influenced by both classical and Renaissance artwork, as well as computer graphics and 3D modeling. His debut exhibition in 2002 consisted of compilations for the game Counter-Strike.
A friend of mine introduced me to this game, Counter-Strike, and it really, in a way, had a great influence on the direction of my art.
In 2010, Marcus Persson added some of Zetterstrand's paintings in the flagship title Minecraft, a sandbox and survival simulator based on Infinitum Miner, and ever since then, the paintings have become an iconic part of the game. His paintings are often based on virtual still lifes and scenography sculpted in 3D applications, and has broadened his source of images to include vintage photography and imagery. In 2008, Zetterstrand received the IASPIS Artist in Residency grant. In 2012, he received the Marianne and Sigvard Bernadotte Art Award. In 2013, he was awarded the, excuse my pronunciation, Stora Kakelpriset, an annual prize for the most innovative and used styles of ceramics in construction in Sweden, for his mosaic Ager Medicine. Zetterstrand's affinity for pixel art and the general aesthetics of video games is a quintessential factor in his distinct visual art style throughout his gallery. But why did I show you those specific paintings? Well, if you notice what I said earlier, Zetterstrand's debut exhibition in 2002 consisted of compilations for the game Counter-Strike, titled Free Look Mode. Many of his paintings were softly painted depictions of Counter-Strike maps, but to the untrained eye, in a strange peculiar angle while some of the walls were missing and peer into a darkness. Is this a strange stylistic choice? Well, given the video you're watching, you know exactly what you're looking at. Zetterstrand had a fascination with the out-of-bounds in video games, and artistically expresses fascination with these creative depictions. In a 2010 interview with Game Scenes, Zetterstrand was questioned about his works regarding free look mode.
Was this the first time you used computer games in your works?
Yes, it was the first time I made paintings using computer games as an inspiration. I had been influenced earlier on their aesthetics and design, but never used them in such an explicit way. The moment I realized I had to paint scenes based on Counter-Strike was when I got killed in the game, and suddenly found myself partly outside of the graphics, being able to see both the realistic 3D world I was bound to a second ago, as well as the black void outside the game, the graphics card's rendering of nothingness. I had a sort of an epiphany.
What is the rationale behind free look mode?
Counter-Strike, for those of you who doesn't know what Counter-Strike is, it's an online team-based game, and you sort of have these rounds. You have to play two teams against each other, and if you die in the game, you have to wait until either team wins, of course. And what you do in the meantime? Well, there was this mode of following the players called free look mode, and it was simply an option to allow the users to keep following the ongoing action by flying through the game map, and you weren't hindered by whether there were any walls or anything there. And I found that when you flew through the walls, you saw parts of the image being quite realistic landscapes and part of the image just abstract void. And I found it was a quite interesting reinterpretation of the classical notion of the spirit world, really. I mean, you were this entity looking through the logical construction of the world, and you could chat with the other players that were dead. You couldn't, of course, influence the game. You couldn't talk to the still living players, but I mean, so I made an exhibition actually based on images from Counter-Strike called Free Look Mode, and this was in 2002. But trying to get the screenshots from the game also meant that sometimes when I was playing the game, I tried to get killed as quickly as possible to get good screenshots, you know. And I remember getting kicked out of quite a few servers because they thought it was weird. They had no idea I was trying to get good, interesting images. But here's a...
Zetterstrand's interpretation of the online spectating aspect of clipping outside worlds is interesting, comparing it to the spirit world, with the spirits wandering through the void, unable to speak to those still alive. But most intriguingly, being able to see through the logical construction of the world, with the world itself being a strange, striking contrast between realistic landscape with feasible geometry, and its hidden faces just being a paint black void. Throughout his paintings, these motifs are strikingly present and stand out to the user, and, as we all know, eventually put an incomprehensible ensemble of colors and squares in Minecraft, giving paintings of rich meaning locked away behind the prison of compression, just existing as we place our blocks happily. As time goes on, we go through life with moments where we are reminded of how it will all end. This state of existentialism may plague many, unable to live their lives without the haunting reminder of what comes at the end. But we shouldn't fear what comes. In our endless search for happiness, we are being with those that we love, caring for the littlest creatures, or playing video games. We celebrate our lives. As a kid, when I got my very first console, the Nintendo DS, I had picked up The Legend of Zelda Spirit Tracks on clearance. I remember vividly, I used to look at the skybox in Spirit Tracks, where it became strikingly obvious that this world was created for me, surrounding me, with the DS's visual hardware not being able to support too many assets at a time. This awareness was something I consciously put away in my mind, a lesson I had unknowingly learned. I'm reminded to something that is no dissimilar to the way we keep a truth tucked away in our minds: the demise. The out of bounds is a strange sincerity that we allow into our experiences, but we don't let it spoil our appreciation for the worlds that people have worked hard to lay on before our eyes. It is an endless nothing, no different to a cliff we encounter in the real world, where we share the strange call of the void, this yearning to jump inside, although we do not succumb. You'd know we would fall. After everything, it would be over. The void, the nothingness, the raw image of death, of nothing, is the mind's way of appreciating life. A strange feeling between the unconscious and conscious. You suddenly having the urge to step away from the void, although you were in no risk of falling. In our worlds, real or fake, we appreciate the opportunities we are given. The worlds outside our true, real bounds are unknown, much like video games. Whether those barriers are the walls of our home, the barriers between each other, or the barrier of our own feelings. Though we face the void every day, we must let it exist in our lives, as light could not touch the hand of darkness without it. So we should remain accepting. Our worlds are strange and we learn from it, and so man remains spending the rest of its many, many days with those it loved, celebrating the festival we call life. If you've made it this far, okay, number one, I want to thank you sincerely. This is my first shot at making actual content, and since YouTube makes it incredibly difficult to grow as a creator, this video will likely not reach many people. Which is why I humbly request that you please share this video around. I don't want subscribers, but liking the video would absolutely help me in letting people like this video reach more people. It would really suck if all of this freaking work went to waste, and I ask no more that you press a button on your screen. It would genuinely mean everything to me, and that my work hasn't gone to waste. I want to I want to apologize for my really awkward reading. In general, I'm actually a really loud person, and like I swear all the time, and I can barely sit still, so like my accent may have gone a little weird. I may mispronounce some words. The pacing is awkward. It's a bit difficult for me to like talk in a controlled environment. So in future videos, I'm probably going to talk like how I am right now, and I'm sorry if it feels forced. I wanted to keep the tone with the video. So I may plan on making more essays in the future, and all of there's probably definitely gonna be more lighthearted and filled with garbage memes and stuff. The tone of the video, the tone of this video is not gonna be exclusive. It's just because it was a mysterious topic. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Seriously, please like the video and help me reach anyone at all. This was pretty nice to edit. I haven't really tried doing anything like this, so yeah, have a good night.